Donald Trump's top 10 campaign promises: build a wall, and make Mexico pay for it. Trump announced his candidacy with a promise to build a Great Wall on our southern border and have Mexico pay for that wall, and has repeated the call with conviction and consistency. But even his supporters have expressed skepticism that this centerpiece promise will see the light of day. An actual wall will be extremely costly, and it remains to be seen how Trump would force Mexico to pay for it. There are some that hear this is going to be 1,200 miles from Brownsville to El Paso, 30 foot high, and listen, I know you can't do that, former Texas Gov. Rick Perry said recently. Perry once denounced Trump but has since endorsed him, temporarily ban Muslims from entering the United States. Following the December 2015 shooting in San Bernardino, California, Trump called for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what is going on. The next day, Trump admitted that details would have to work out and said it wouldn't apply to all Muslims, but remained vague on the timeline or the exemptions. Scholars were divided on whether banning people of an entire faith would violate the Constitution. In early May, Trump told the New York Times the ban would be in place by the end of his first 100 days in office. But on Fox News Radio a few days later, he said that it was just a suggestion. A month later, he recommitted to the ban, tweaking it to now encompass immigrants from nations tied to Islamic terror, bring manufacturing back. Trump has said he will revitalize manufacturing in various iterations, i.e., "I'm going to be the greatest jobs president God ever created," and laid out how in his June 28 speech on the economy. But most experts say that Trump wouldn't be able to bring back all 4 million lost manufacturing jobs, which have been declining since the 1940s, well before the modern era of free trade deals and China's economic rise. Harry Moser, president of the Reshoring Initiative, is more optimistic that Trump could deliver, but said Trump would have to be in it for the long haul. "You can't do it in a day. You can't do it a year. I'd be delighted if we can do it in a decade or two, impose tariffs on goods made in China and Mexico." Warren Maruyama, a former general counsel to the U.S. Trade Representative under Presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama, told us President Trump would have the authority under a variety of trade statutes to impose higher tariffs, but added it would lead to a trade war and cost hundreds and thousands of jobs. Hal Shapiro, an attorney specializing in international trade practice, pointed to Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974, which gives the president the power to impose retaliatory tariffs on countries that violate trade agreements or engage in unfair trade practices under. But Shapiro said he can't think of a single instance where a U.S. company offshoring is considered an unfair trade practice by the foreign country. Trump's promise also violates international trade rules, and he's yet to propose exiting the World Trade Organization. So assuming the United States stays in the club, Beijing and Mexico City wouldn't take his blanket tariffs lying down and would almost certainly retaliate, renegotiate or withdraw from the North American Free Trade Agreement and Trans-Pacific Partnership. Trump has been most critical of NAFTA and TPP, pinning them to Clinton and past and future job losses. President Trump would have the authority to bow out of the North American Free Trade Agreement and the Trans-Pacific Partnership. But such a move may not increase American manufacturing jobs. An expert told us that leverage works in both directions. Countries like Mexico and Canada would have a list of things they'd want from the United States. Alan Wolf, a former U.S. Deputy Trade Representative under President Jimmy Carter. These are balanced, hard-to-negotiate agreements, full repeal of Obamacare and replace it with a market-based alternative. Trump's call to repeal Obamacare and replace it with a marketplace alternative is popular among rank-and-file Republicans. Larger majorities in Congress would be needed for repeal. If a Trump win is accompanied by Republican control of both houses of Congress, then some significant rollback is feasible and likely, said John McDonough, a health policy professor at Harvard University. Renegotiate the Iran deal. Similarly, Trump has a shot at delivering on his promise to renegotiate with Iran even though Iran has said it won't revisit the issue. Mark Dubowitz, executive director of the Nonpartisan Foundation for Defense of Democracies, sees Iran's attitude as posturing and pointed out that there's precedent for a follow-up talk. The Iranians are continuing to negotiate, demanding significant economic concessions, Dubowitz said. I have confidence both Trump and Clinton could renegotiate a better deal, leave Social Security as is. Trump has said repeatedly that voters like Social Security, so it should be left alone. Unlike most of his primary rivals, Trump vowed to leave the retirement age and benefits intact. There's no way a Republican is going to beat a Democrat when the Republican is saying, "We are going to cut your Social Security," and the Democrat is saying, "We are going to keep it and give you more," Trump reportedly told House Speaker Paul Ryan, who wants entitlement cuts, in May. But beyond calling for a crackdown on fraud and waste, Trump hasn't specified how exactly he would save the program. He claims that his economic proposals would preserve Social Security by making the country rich again, though that's not supported by multiple analyses. Trump's commitment to this promise may also be wavering. His policy advisor Sam Clovis told Reuters in May that Trump would be open to changes to Social Security if elected. Cut taxes. Under Trump's proposed tax reforms, everyone would indeed get a cut. The top 0.1% would receive more tax relief than the bottom 60% of taxpayers combined. Trump's plan would bloat the federal deficit by at least $10 trillion over the next decade, even if you factor in economic growth. This makes his promise of protecting Social Security harder to keep, given the program is one of the biggest line items in the budget. On average, experts scored the Trump tax plan's chances of passing as a D. The campaign has said the details of his tax plan are subject to change, and would soon announce a new policy. It hasn't yet done so. Bomb and or take the oil from ISIS. A twist on his decade-old idea to seize Middle Eastern oil as repayment. Trump repeatedly makes this promise on the campaign trail, arguing it'll cut off funding to ISIS. The United States has already been bombing oil assets under ISIS control for quite some time, though. As for how he would take the oil, Trump told the Washington Post's editorial board in March he would circle and defend those areas with ground troops, but wouldn't commit to a number. To keep this promise, Trump would have to invade Syria and convince the Assad regime to give up their claims on oil and gas in the country, according to Matthew Reed, vice president of Foreign Reports, a consultant firm specializing in Middle East oil politics.